Good morning. I'm Hassan Giordano, and this is your DMV Daily Dose for Tuesday, February 4th, 2020.
It's currently raining and 52 degrees in Baltimore. Expect cloudy skies starting in the morning. Today's high will be 60 degrees, and the low will be 51.
Well, today is Election Day, at least in the 7th Congressional District, as voters head to the polls to select between 24 Democrats and 8 Republicans vying to fill out the remaining months of the late Congressman Elijah Cummings' congressional term. Polls are open between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. tonight at a poll near you. And today marks the first time that Maryland voters get to utilize the newest law, allowing residents to register to vote and vote at the same time at polls on Election Day. The process that had only been available during early voting in years past. Now, if you have any issues or concerns today when you show up to the polls, volunteers from Voice, voters organized for the integrity of city elections, and Value My Vote 2020 will be available by email at info@valuemyvote2020.com or by phone at 443-456-8830. Speaking of elections, the season got started last night in Iowa as voters turned out to caucus in the Hawkeye State. But the issue is, nobody seemed to win, at least yet. The Iowa Democratic Party said last night that results from the state's first-in-the-nation caucus were delayed due to quality checks and, quote, inconsistencies in some reporting. An embarrassing complication that added a new layer of doubt to an already uncertain presidential primary season. The party said that the problem was not a result of a hack or intrusion, and promised that final results will be released on Tuesday. The statement came after tens of thousands of voters spent hours Monday night sorting through a field of nearly a dozen candidates who had spent much of the previous year fighting to win the opening contest of the 2020 campaign and ultimately the opportunity to take on President Donald Trump this fall. Now, the confusion threatened to permanently stain the kickoff caucuses and allow critics to raise questions about the integrity of this year's results whenever they are released. And with no official evidence to the contrary, virtually every candidate claimed momentum heading into next up New Hampshire, which votes in just 7 days. Now, the Baltimore Sun's Phil Davis is reporting on a man who was awarded $700,000 in damages after a federal jury found several correctional officers and their supervisors liable for a 2013 attack inside a Baltimore inmate intake facility. The jury awarded Kevin Younger, an inmate at the facility who claimed several guards beat him up in his cell in retaliation for an assault on another correctional officer. $700,000 on Monday was given to Younger after a civil trial in which former correctional officers testified about a culture of violent retaliation inside one of the state's correctional facilities. Now, the lawsuit alleged that after word spread around the other correctional officers that one of their own had been badly assaulted, corrections officers Quasi Ramsey, Jemiah Green, and Richard Hanna beat Younger inside his cell in September of 2013 as the three assaulted 5 prisoners in retaliation for an attack on another officer the day before. Younger sued the 3 and prison officials and supervisors, Tyrone Crowder and Neil Dupree, claiming that they allowed the attack to occur. The Sun's Holly Miller is reporting that Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosch's office announced Monday the filing of criminal charges against the person responsible for the demolition of the historic St. Vincent Infant Asylum building in 2018, which they allege was not only illegal but also hazardous in nature. The office charged William Anthony Culler, II of the Culler Group, with unlawfully demolishing the West Baltimore properties. Now, the buildings demolished almost exactly 2 years ago to the day came down without sufficient notice and without airborne asbestos prevention, the office alleged, which endangered those in the neighborhood. Quote, We allege Color illegally demolished these buildings without proper notice and authorization and without the required safeguards in place, Frost said in a statement. Asbestos is an extremely hazardous substance and can become airborne during demolition, endangering the health of workers and the surrounding communities, including children, he went on to say. Color is charged with 8 counts, including failing to obtain the proper demolition permits and approval from the Maryland Department of the Environment, failure to inspect for the presence of asbestos, and failure to notice the department of intent to engage in an asbestos project. Each charge is punishable by up to a year in prison and a fine of up to $25,000, according to the announcement. Now, Maryland Matters' Frank DiFilippo is reporting on Maryland political history as he does so well. And he reports in the state special prosecutor who was never intended to be Maryland's gangbuster. In fact, in his article, the office wasn't supposed to exist at all, DiFilippo says. It was rejected twice by the Maryland General Assembly, and finally, out of frustration and to rid itself of this pesky problem, the legislature sent the issue to the referendum in 1976, where the voters approved it. From computer printout and introduction to law book entry and enforcement, lawmaking is often a long and torturous journey for a bill. The legislature opposed it. The Attorney General rejected it, and the governor at the moment, Marvin Mandel, himself under investigation by federal prosecutors, praised for his wizardry at winning passage of the legislation, gave the bill only lip service as he let it die twice for lack of his arm-twisting support. And now, nearly a half-century later, with the law on the books and the prosecutors safely secured, the new man on the job, Charlton Howard III, wants to give it more time and broaden its reach to collar errant public officials. The proposals being introduced in the Maryland legislature during this session would do so by expanding the definition of public official, imposing mandatory sentences on those officials, and lifting the 2-year statute of limitations to widen its net. At least a half a dozen offenders have been nailed over the past couple of years thanks to this office, but they were all small potatoes compared to the capital letter names of the early 1970s that federal prosecutors investigated and convicted, including Vice President Spiro Agnew for crimes beginning when he was governor, Baltimore County Exec Dale Anderson, Anne Arundel County Exec Joseph Alton, and the most drawn out and dramatic of them all, Marvin Mandel and 5 of his cronies. And the Baltimore Sun's Luke Broadwater is reporting on a Maryland Senate committee who postponed confirmation votes of nearly 20 nominees to the University of Maryland Medical System Board yesterday, citing an unfinished audit into the self-dealing scandal that rocked the hospital network just last year. Members of the Senate's Executive Nominations Committee are considering 18 appointees to the board, most of whom were nominated by Governor Larry Hogan, a Republican, and after the General Assembly last year passed sweeping reform legislation that forced all the board members to resign, they now have to reapply for their posts. Senator Ronald Young, a Frederick County Democrat who is chair of the Executive Nominations Committee, said that members were particularly concerned about 3 returning members who were nominated to return to the board despite the scandal. He says, why didn't they know? The postponement means the board members could go without a confirmation vote for several more weeks. The board has been under intense scrutiny since March of last year when the Baltimore Sun reported that a third of its 30 members had deals with the 13 hospital systems, some not competitively bid out. One of those deals was with then Baltimore Mayor Catherine Pugh, a Democrat who made hundreds of thousands of dollars selling her Healthy Holly children's book to the system. She resigned from the board in March of last year and as mayor in May and pleaded guilty to the federal conspiracy and tax evasion charges just last month. She is set to be sentenced on February 27th, later this month. While most new board nominees receive praise from the senators, tough questions have come for 3 returning board members. That's the board chairman, James Chip DePaula Jr., Vice Chairman Alexander Williams Jr., and Louis Pope, a former state GOP chairman. Senators also are concerned about whether the hospital network is fully compliant with a legally mandated audit after the state's top legislative auditor said the hospital network was hindering his work. Well, I'm your man, Mr. Politics, and this has been your DMV Daily Dose for Tuesday, February 4th, 2020, aka Election Day. For more information on the articles that I mentioned, just go on over to our website at www.dmvdaily.news and make sure you get out and exercise your right to vote today.